A reading from the book of Revelation. A great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child and wailed aloud in pain as she labored to give birth. Then another sign appeared in the sky. It was a huge red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. Its tail swept away a third of the stars in the sky and then hurled them down to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman about to give birth, to devour her child when she gave birth. She gave birth to a son, a male child, destined to rule the nations with an iron rod. The woman herself fled into the desert where she had prepared a place by God. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have salvation and power come, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his anointed." The word of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Over 2 months ago, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the first apparition of Our Lady of Fatima to a group of shepherd children. The series of Fatima appearances lasted from May of 1917 until October, and it is one of the most extraordinary events in the history of the Church. I spoke already about Our Lady of Fatima, and the last time I spoke about the blessed coincidences that come to us, which Fatima helps to highlight. But in this particular talk, and since we're still celebrating this 100th anniversary, I'd like to focus on 3 reasons why I believe this event is so extraordinary. First of all, this particular visitation of Mary took place at the height of the First World War, also known as the Great War. To the simple children who barely understood what she was saying, Our Lady announced that the Great War would soon end. And she also called for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. Furthermore, she urged the children to pray for the conversion of Russia, which, believe it or not, was a mysterious exhortation given the fact that at the time she said this, communism and the revolution did not even take place in Russia yet. Secondly, what confirms that the appearances at Fatima actually happened is one of the most stunning and widely attested miracles in the history of Christianity. I mentioned this last time. In the afternoon of October 13th, 1917, approximately 70,000 people gathered at the apparition site in order to witness what the Lady had promised would be a marvelous sign. Now, among this huge crowd of people were many skeptics who had actually come out only to scoff. But before the eyes of 70,000 people, the sun commenced to dance, turning and dashing from place to place in the sky, and finally appearing to plummet toward the earth. Amazement at the dancing sun immediately turned to panic when the sun seemed to hurl toward earth. And fearing the end of the world, some people screamed and ran, some tried to hide, and others remained on their knees praying for mercy. But just like that, the sun returned to its place. Believe it or not, some of the most astounding accounts of this incident were composed by journalists who were confirmed agnostics or atheists. Third reason, 83 years after the apparition at Fatima, the third and final secret was published. It was a vision of a bishop dressed in white shot down amid the rubble of a ruined city. The Vatican interpreted this vision as referring to the persecution of Christians in the 20th century, which, believe it or not, exceeds any other century in terms of numbers of people persecuted for the Christian faith. And secondly, they interpreted it specifically to the 1981 assassination attempt on the life of Pope John Paul II. As you may remember, 2 bullets from the assassin's gun pierced the Pope's abdomen, but no major organs were struck. The bullet missed his heart and aorta by a few inches. St. John Paul would say it was a mother's hand that guided the bullet's path. This miracle is a key in understanding well Pope John Paul's devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. Given that the date of the assassination was on the very feast of Our Lady of Fatima, May 13th, 1981, the Pope specifically credited Our Lady of Fatima with his miraculous survival and recovery. Several months later, he visited the site of the apparition, the first of 3 visits he would make as Pope to Fatima. And when he arrived at the little chapel of the apparitions, he was holding in his hand one of the bullets that struck him. He slowly approached the statue and placed the bullet in her crown, continually saying to her, "You saved me, you saved me." For Pope John Paul, St. Pope John Paul, Our Lady of Fatima was everything, and his 3 visits to the Portuguese town were those of a grateful son to a mother who saved his life. This special papal bond of St. John Paul with Our Lady of Fatima continues today with Pope Francis, who, as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, was a frequent visitor to a shrine in the Argentine city devoted to her. When he, as Pope, visited Fatima in 215, he proclaimed to the believing world, "Entrust to her all that you are, all that you have, and in that way, you will become an instrument of mercy and tenderness of God to your family, neighbors, and friends." My brothers and sisters, we should not let a day pass without getting closer to Mary. She knows our hearts. Her maternal heart knows our needs and wants to love and care for us. And this in no way will distract us from Jesus, her Son, or from the call that we're receiving to be people of justice and the salvation of others' needs. It's important to remember that, like the moon that points gratefully to the sun for its light, Mary's whole purpose is to point us to Jesus and to the needs of others. My favorite saint, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, liked to think of Mary as a star in the night, guiding those in the pilgrimage of faith. So he would continually say, "Look at the star. Call on Mary." You know, today more than ever, we need faith in order to be closer to God and to our brothers and sisters. And we need less prejudice and less hatred. We need hope and we need peace. In short, the message of Fatima given 100 years ago is of extreme relevance today. We are still in need of conversion, more now than ever. And Mary wishes that we be converted. She's calling us to use the sacraments, especially to go to the sacrament of confession. And I say this to you not in any way of wanting to condemn anybody, because I'm part of this. I'm a sinner. It's simply a request to get our act together, to examine our consciences against the teachings of Jesus Christ and his church, and not simply to examine them against our own isolated, privatized conscience. So may we allow the grace of God to come into that, and may he shed his light in our darkness, because he came precisely to be the light of the world. Our Lady of Fatima, ora pro nobis.